In Boston, an unvaccinated father has been removed from the top of the heart transplant list because of his vaccination status. Now, I mean, whatever happened to the Hippocratic oath here? Whatever happened to first do no harm? And whatever happened to not punishing people because of their medical choices? We've seen this starting in the NHS in Britain for years and years, long before the pandemic. There have all been for years floating, well, we're going to deny medical treatment to the obese or to the smokers or to the people who drink too much. Because, of course, once you start to make medicine socialized, well, that sounds wonderful. Everybody gets free health care. But then eventually, you know, as Thatcher said, you start to run out of other people's money. And you have to start rationing it. And, of course, for the socialists, it's all about who is virtuous, who is not, who's following their rules, who is not. And what happens is people stop being treated as individuals with dignity and a right to treatment, and instead as bodies who are cogs of this bigger machine whose health has to do with the overall health of the community.
That is the socialist collectivist fantasy. The Black Lives Matter purchased an $8 million Toronto mansion. The group's finances are quite rightly being scrutinised. There you go.
Well, I mean,
and this is Stalinism again. The Black Lives Matter get all the money.
It's not even Stalinism. I think this is really, you know, it's even more thuggish than that. This is more sort of like it becomes almost a mafia protection racket because corporations, and you saw this during all of the unrest in 2020, that this was all about corporations then saying, okay, we will, you know, write the check. Here you go. Leave us alone. We're fine. We're not going to have any protests in front of our shops. And it's about the corporate virtue signaling. And, of course, no accountability. We don't know where any of that money is going. But we do know that $8.1 million of it was used to buy a mansion in Toronto. So it's a nice place to be locked down when you're in lockdown-loving Canada, I guess. You know, identity politics going from, you know, it's a long march to the institution. So, you know, it's all very well. People can say, oh, you know, what are you guys talking about? It's just some nonsense stuff happening in the classroom, you know, just some goofy stuff happening on university campuses. But this is the end result. You have different sentencing for different criminals, depending on the color of their skin, depending on their beliefs. And all of a sudden, you know, that's not America anymore, where it's supposed to be all about equal protection. That's the shining light to the world America always represented. As for the Supreme Court pick, well, it's bonkers because for Joe Biden to be suddenly saying that he's, you know, all about, I want to get a minority, I want to get a black woman on the Supreme Court. He was the #1 cheerleader of the campaign against Clarence Thomas when he was nominated for the Supreme Court. So, I mean, it's really rich for Joe Biden to somehow suddenly start playing the racial justice card on this one, guys.
This is not a detention camp. This is an educational facility. Look me in the eye, then. Don't just sit there and look at your phone.
Chris, do you know
I need to get my daughter. I don't know. What library was my kid in? Because nobody locks my kid in a library. In the main office.
Where's the main office? Right here.
It's going to go left.
So what we saw there was an irate parent because she couldn't get access to a kid who's locked up in the library.
But the good thing, Rowan, is that we are seeing across the United States huge pushbacks against this sort of thing. We're seeing it in New York. The whole Virginia election that got Gary Youngkin in was largely about exactly this sort of treatment. Colorado, we are now seeing parents taking over school board meetings over and over and over again. Parents are tired of it. And I think the bureaucrats are on the run. I want to talk about not just what young kids are being freighted with, but what older kids are being taught at America's universities here. And I suspect the same thing is happening here in Australia. And I almost think we should have a segment about this where we say, meet your future coworkers and HR officials, because these people are coming to a workplace near you, I'm afraid. At the University of New Hampshire, students have been taking a class where they are taught, wait for it, that they have to report somebody for racism, homophobia, ableism, whatever that is, or a host of other microaggressions, and record this accusation and this interaction with the person they're accusing so that they can get credit for the course. Now,
what's the Thrones thing? Game of Thrones, great actor, very good. He's come out and said to Disney, who were wanting to remake as a live-action movie, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, you can't do that. It's a backward story about seven dwarfs living in a cave. But now the dwarfs are fighting back.
Well, I mean, Rowan, the important thing to know about this is statistics show that 6 out of 7 dwarves are not happy.
Oh, jeez. I thought Rowan...
How long did you workshop that one? How long was he doing that? I mean, George Orwell himself could not do this better. Tell us about it, James.
So basically, you know, the movie Fight Club, well, in the end, they've changed the Fight Club ending so that they all get caught and the authorities win. So, you know, Orwell couldn't script this better himself.
I think Jacinda Ardern thinks she's living in Lord of the Rings. I think she's Gollum or something or other, because they've locked up this entire place. No one's allowed in or out. This poor woman, pregnant, isn't allowed back into her own country, James.
Well, you know, we've seen this case. We've seen so many other cases in New Zealand. We've seen the rules that came out this week suggesting that somebody who was a close contact of somebody else in their household may wind up having to isolate for 24 days.
Not may, that's the new
because
rule.
New Zealand has decided, unlike any other country in the world except for perhaps China, to go for this insane COVID zero mentality. Worse than WA. You know, imagine Fifth Avenue, New York, with thousands of police officers in full dress uniform. The widow gave an incredibly powerful eulogy against you know, what's happened, the way her husband's death has been talked about, because, you know, they've blamed it on the gun, not the criminal, and all these sorts of lefty things. There's a new mayor in New York, Eric Adams, who's fighting to change some policies. The governor in New York is not coming to the party on a lot of this. But it is really something, because a lot of people are saying that now this is finally this sort of critical moment in the life of New York where it's time, and we've seen this time and again, you know, we saw this before Rudy Giuliani came into power, you know, back in the 90s. Here we are. Have a look at that. All of them, thousands and thousands and thousands, just standing there saluting and paying respect to their fallen comrade.
Restriction.
And, you know, the thing is, in Canada, you know, we think here in Australia that we've gone completely bonkers and are still, you know, not living with COVID. Well, over in Canada, they are still doing huge restrictions, provincial lockdowns. They've got rules about being vaccinated to go from one state across into the next one. But this protest is about much, much more than just simply the vaccine mandates. And it is about the entire way COVID has been handled in Canada. And in fact, I would say really in so many Western countries. There was a piece in the Washington Post which explains exactly how messed up the mainstream media is on this. So I was reading it before we came on. They said this is a toxic demonstration. They used words like toxic about it. They said that the media should refuse to humanize. Refuse to humanize the protesters. So they're talking about fascism.
Yeah,
you know,
well, let's look at the cartoon.
They're saying
James,
they're not humans.
Just have a look at this cartoon, James.
Look at this.
This is a cartoon that ran in which they actually literally dehumanised those protesters as fascists and decrying them all as fascists.